Go over here. We're looking up us on live real quick. View my channel. It should come up as a live. You're going to open that and just watch the chat. John's my moderator today.
I'm on your computer.
So over here is going to be chatty chats, and you're going to read them out when people come on. But today, we're celebrating St. Patrick's Day because, well...
I'm not going to be here for St. Patrick's Day.
Yeah, so I need to mute my computer here so you don't get feedback from that. And yeah, we have some drinks.
Okay. And I figured we would start with some Irish whiskey.
Oh God, we're starting with that. Okay. So John is technically, his family is from Cork. And so yeah, we're going to talk about tension on the circular sock machine. What?
My
Cork?
grandmother's from Kerry. My grandfather's from Cork.
Okay, well, I got one of the two.
You got 50% ain't bad.
All right, so cheers to everybody, and we're going to talk about tension on the circular sock machine. So
Sláinte.
Sláinte.
And next, no, don't chug it yet. You've got to turn the label. You are going to try to split the G.
This?
So, splitting the G is where you try with your very first sip to split right in the middle of the G. And let's see if she can do it. Nope. Not even close.
Not even close. All right. Let's get this set up. I don't know if anybody's on there yet. I'm going to turn this around. 4 people.
Thing says 4.
Can I change it? Oh, no. Can I not change it? Oh,
sure you can.
Wait, I can. Okay. It just took a second. All right, so let's get this on my machine. And we are going to talk about tension on our circular sock machine. Does it look okay?
It looks good.
All right, it looks good, he says. So I can move light wherever. Let's talk about just tension in general. And I have an Erlbacher Gearhart Speedster, so I have a VCAM machine, meaning this is my VCAM here, and this is what adjusts your tension, okay? So that means when you turn this knob and go down, you're making the stitches longer, right? So when the VCAM goes up, this space in here gets shorter. When the VCAM goes down, it makes your stitches longer. So if you have a thicker yarn, you might want to go, that's what I was trying to do. Make it go down. So I would crank it to go down. If I need to get it a tighter tension, I'm going to go up. Now, with the Erlbacher machines, I know that most of them come already pre-cranked. So they test the tension, they test everything and make sure it cranks before they mail it to you. So before you get it, they test this. So if you get this and you mess with it too much, you're going to throw your tension off right away. I'm not saying you shouldn't mess with this at all, but from the factory, you're going to be good to go, okay? I mean, to at least crank a tube, you might not love the tension it's at with the yarn because we all know that all yarns are not made equal, right? Not all fingering weight yarns are, nobody's chatted. Okay. Not all fingering weight yarns are going to be made the same. Also, this helps you guide, like you can tell where your tension has been set previously. You can mark it if you have a preference. I actually have taken this and cranked it all the way up to the top so it's flush and put the number 1 to the outside. And I found my sweet spot that I like for most of the yarns that I was previously cranking, which was like Knit Pick Stroll, Knit Picks Fleechy, etc. So I actually have this 2 looser. I'm going to go back to 2. That's longer. So let's go back to shorter. So the VCAM moved up as I turned it this direction. Okay, so lefty, loosey, righty, tighty, that doesn't really mean a whole lot. You just have to remember which way, which I have a sticky actually on my wall because I can never remember. And I'm going to pull that down for you right now just to show you what I'm talking about. So to make the stitches longer, I'm going to turn it this way. And to make them shorter, I'm going to turn it that way because that's how I remember. And I keep this up above my cranking station. So let's get some yarn on here and I'll show you what I'm talking about. Okay, so we're just going to put a bonnet on. I'm not putting any waste yarn. I'm just going to go straight from putting regular yarn on. I could use waste yarn actually to show you how the tension changes. So now some people don't want a really super tight, yeah, it's because this is in the front, John. It's not gonna, so try not to shake it too much.
Sorry.
It's okay. I know it's gonna
Please file
change.
any grievances in the chat. That was my fault.
So we're just gonna put our bonnet on. I have a split ring bonnet. Not everybody likes split ring bonnets. I like my split ring bonnet. And you can only go as far as the needles are available. So we're gonna put our buckle on. This is your buckle. You put this on and then you put your weights on. You need that downward tension to make your stitches knit. So I'm just gonna grab any yarn actually that I have up here, and we're gonna play with the tension. I'm not sure what you're gonna view.
Okay, can I ask questions?
You can ask questions. Sure.
So, I always assumed you had to do a ring on every single needle. You skip a needle every time?
Every other, yes. So the bonnets are intentionally every other needle. You don't have to put it on every needle because once you get cranking, the yarn will crank onto every
And
needle.
why don't we care about those last rings?
I can't access them. They're down under the V-cam right now, so I can't put loops on them. So I have to put yarn on first. I'm going to hold the tail in here. I'm going to crank around, and now I can access those, see? So I'm going to now put them on.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so John has watched me do this a bunch of times, and he might actually know the answers to some of his own questions, but...
No, I honestly do not.
Oh, so now it has knit every stitch, or every needle now has yarn on it. So we're going to focus, and I'm not quite sure how well my camera is going to do with this, but we're going to try to get in here and really see the opposite side of the machine here. So we're looking at the tension here. So you can see how spread apart these purl bumps are, right? So we're going to just crank a little bit more. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to make my tension tighter for you guys to see. So that means I'm going to turn my tension knob to the right to make it 2 clicks shorter. Now, this is another thing that I noticed when I see posts in CSM groups. People like turn it 8, 9 times. 2 times will really adjust your tension greatly, okay?
A little bit goes a long way.
A little bit goes a long way, yeah. A little bit goes a long way. So we're going to crank a couple rows. And I'm not sure how much you can see between here and up here. You see the spacing? Now with this yarn, I definitely like a tighter gauge up here than this looser gauge, because that means your sock will be more airy, right? So let's do 2 more. So at this point, I'm now going to be 4 shorter than my normal tension, okay? We're going to talk about the heel spring later in a minute, because that also changes. You can see a drastic change already. Also, my stitches don't want to go back down to the bed of the needle, or to the bed of the cylinder. See how they stay up and they don't fall down right away? It takes them a minute to fully go down. Now, if they're not going down at all, your tension is way too tight. So you won't be able to crank. I am not going to put my machine through the agony of not being able to crank. So I am not going to do that to myself or my machine right now. But if I were to go 2 more clicks, this really isn't going to want to crank at all, okay? This is really tight tension, okay? So let's talk a little bit about going back to, I'm going to go 4 back, go all the way back to my normal sweet spot, okay? So I'm going to click 4 longer, 2, 3, 4, okay?
So you did not want it as tight as you just made it?
No, because let's talk about the heel spring real quick, okay? We're going to talk about how the heel spring changes your tension. Some people crank their whole sock with the heel spring on, and that's because they want the tension to be the same throughout the leg, the foot, and the heel, right? So let's show an example real quick of this is cranked at whatever tension, right? I cranked the foot part here.
Mm-hmm.
Can you see how much tighter the heel stitches are? Because the heel spring was on, which makes your tension change. And that is why some people crank their whole sock with the heel spring on. So if you do that, you need to account for the heel spring being on the whole time. okay? So if you want all your stitches to look even and nice through the whole sock, you might be the person that wants to crank your sock with the heel spring on the whole time. Now, once you put a heel spring on, that changes your tension. So I've went back to normal, my first tension, okay? So let's crank a few rows so you can see the difference again. This was when it was 4 tighter than my sweet spot. This is back to my sweet spot tension. Right now, I have to tell you guys, I don't have the full heel weight on. So Erlbacher makes a heel weight that is this size. Okay, I've taken that off. I have one that is half the weight. Meaning, when I crank and I put my heel spring on, it's not changing my tension as drastically from no heel spring to heel spring. Let me show you guys the weight real quick that I have on the machine. So this is the one I have on the machine. It might be hard to see. Here's
wait, the weight is up there
for the heel spring. Yeah, so this is what changes your heel spring, right? So this is the full size weight on the left, and this is the half weight on the side, on the right side. This is half the size of this one. So because I used the half heel weight, my tension between my leg and my foot and my heel isn't as drastic as it was when I had the full weight on. Okay.
Does the big weight come with the machine?
The big,
you had to buy that one separately.
Correct. So the full weight comes with the machine. Okay.
So folks that just bought a machine might be coming with the full weight. So what's the answer without having to buy another weight? Or that's just personal preference down the road?
It's personal preference down the road. That is correct. So, and nobody's talked in the chat. Okay, that's fine. I'm okay with that. It's Sunday. It's a weird time. We weren't sure what we were doing today. I don't have Hazel as my moderator because she's out having a play date. So
so John
gets to be
second fiddle.
My person. Okay, so
and Quill she's only had a shot and the first swig of Guinness. So if you guys need her to do a glug,
all right,
of
I'm
Guinness,
glugging.
Put it in the comments and I will make her do it.
Okay.
Maureen says hello.
Hello, Maureen. Okay, so we are back at my sweet spot. Okay, so we're gonna crank just those couple more rows. I'm gonna put my heel spring on. So what the heel spring essentially does is when you're making the heel of your sock and you have stitches up and down, you can go backwards and forwards because it holds the tension on your yarn, but it also changes the tension in your sock. So I've now put my half heel weight spring. I've put my heel spring on. Okay. So we're going to crank a few rows with the heel spring on, and we're going to go and we're going to see it change to be a little bit tighter than it was up here. Okay. So let's crank a few rows. And honestly, that half heel weight has really made it much tighter, almost to those 4 clicks we made, those 4 turns of our tension knob, okay? So I just need people to be aware that when you do your sample, when you crank a swatch with your yarn, if you know you want to crank it with the heel spring on the whole time, crank your swatch with the heel spring on, okay? So we're gonna just go a little bit further, and you can really see the tension has changed with just that half heel weight, okay? So this is just one yarn we've went and cranked. So let's...
Still considered waste yarn at this point?
No, this is real yarn. I'm just, I'm gonna cut it and use it, and I'm gonna put it in the scrappy socks. It's okay, it's totally fine.
Okay.
But we're gonna crank some Patton's Croy, because people always talk about how Patton's Croy is thicker. It's more like a sport weight. But let me tell you a story, guys. I yesterday was talking to my husband, John, about Patton's Croy.
Hi, nice to meet you.
I've told him how I felt the Patton's Croy yarn in the last couple years has gotten a little bit thinner. And I was trying to crank a sock for his friend, and his work buddy, because they all love the socks. They like work out in the cold.
Construction guys and warm socks in the wintertime.
Wool is the way to go.
Who would have known?
So this one was much more thicker when I started to, like, I used almost all of this to crank the leg because I do 120 rows for a leg with a 40 row hung hem. So that's a lot of rows. That's almost the whole sock, almost the whole leg. And then this yarn, when I put it to do the foot, it was so, the tension had changed so much. And I was really upset about it. So I ripped the whole thing out because I did not like it. I was not going to give that sock away to somebody. I was so upset about it. So I looked at the labels of these. John bought a bunch of Patton's Croy to crank for him and some of his work buddies, because John's that kind of guy. He loves his friends and he loves his work buddies and he wants them all to be happy, and he really supports me like a whole lot. So I pulled the labels out. I have them in the bottom. I had one label from 2020 and all the other labels were 2023 and 2024. And that proved to me right there that they have changed the makeup of Patton's Croy. I'm not gonna lie. I'm standing by it. I'm standing by it. So I'm gonna take the thicker one because I know this one is a lot thicker. This is of the Dad's Jacquard. And this one is definitely thicker. So let's cut this and I'm going to show you a Russian join real quick. So this in hand knitting is used very much to join new balls of yarn. So I am going to make a loop. I've made a loop. I've cut my yarn. Now this is much easier to do when you have a split yarn carrier. Okay, so I've made a loop. I've put my tail in. I'm going to crank forward just a little bit, and I still have my tiny little loop here, and I'm going to put my new yarn in and show you guys the difference. This is my sweet spot. This is where I like to crank, right? So I'm going to put my yarn in and we're going to see how this cranks right off the bat. Normally when I was cranking old Patton's Croy or Patton's Croy FX, because I noticed the FX is definitely part of the line. So I have looped the yarn in. I now have the tail and the yarn that's going to feed in together, and we're going to crank that forward. Okay. So it doesn't want to go down because it's super thick. Yep. So this is my sweet spot tension, and it hates it. It does not want to go down. It doesn't want to drop. It's not happy whatsoever. Okay, so we're going to change the tension. I'm pointing at the tension knob and you can barely see it. Okay, we're going to change the tension to go 2 clicks longer, meaning the V-cam is going down two spaces. I don't even know what to call that, but I'm doing it 2 clicks. So let's see how much that changes it. Okay. I knew I wasn't going to keep cranking with it at that tightness. So here is 2 clicks longer. And I love that. It's great. It looks beautiful. Now, the real test would be if you don't want to crank with your heel spring on and you want to make a sample or you want to make a swatch, this is what I do. I crank a few rows and then I test how it works if I had to do a heel, right? So I'm going to lift up my needles and we're going to go to the back. Now I need to put my heel spring on because that's how you go back and forth. If you don't have your heel spring on, this gets all bunched up. It doesn't pull. So we're going to lift one needle to decrease like we would normally do. And it's cranking pretty good. So I would say 2 clicks longer would be good enough. At this point, I do need to put some heel weights in if I were to do this. But we're just going to go back to in the round. Okay, so
hold on.
Oh, question.
Miss Maureen said, I am new to this, and after 2 weeks, I cannot get my heels without dropping stitches at the corners.
The
Any
corners.
tips?
The corners are always the problem. And
That's the
usually
problem.
it's your tension. It's your tension and or it's not enough downward. You're not putting your weights on soon enough, or you're not putting your weights in at the right timing. Like, use your heel weights. This is so important to have the downward tension from the weight to pull down, because that is when people lose. I'll go into a heel, but let me just real quick.
Are you in a heel right now?
No, I put all the needles back down into work.
Okay.
Oh, I still have my heel spring on, so that's why it's doing that. But let me show you.
Did you just take the heel spring off?
I did. I took the heel spring off, so it's going to crank really beautifully, right? It's going to crank wonderful. Okay. Let's go even longer. We're going to go 2 more clicks longer. I want to show you guys how the tension changes. So you can see that it's went even further. We're going to go 2 more clicks. So now we're at 6, because I need to remember this, right? So we're at 6.
Why do you need to remember 6?
So I can go back to my normal tension.
Okay.
Okay. So we're at 6. You can see
your normal tension?
Back at 43.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's okay. So this is at 6 more than my average. We're going to go even longer. I want to show you guys how much it really elongates. So let's go 2 longer. Now we're at 8. And every time I do that, this V-cam is going down further. So now we're going to go to 10. That's 10 clicks longer. And you can see the holes are getting wider every time we do this. So that's 10. I'm going to run out of yarn. And I'm going to do 12. So now we're at 12. Can you see how much wider they gotten as we've went along? Okay. So that's 12. So I'm going to run out of yarn here. Let's get back to close to normal. So we were 12. So I'm going to go back to shorter tension. 11, 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, and 2. I knew it cranked at 2 longer was really good for this yarn. Okay, Miss Maureen, I am going to show you some heel stuff. Even though that was not what we were doing, that's fine.
We owe it to Maureen.
We owe it. So I'm going to pull this in.
Maureen.
I'm going to pull this in. I'm not going to do a real join because I didn't leave myself enough yarn. So let's get another ball of that same pattern crochet out. And actually, I'm going to put this yarn back on because this is just going to be so much easier. So I'm going to try to keep my lives to 30 to an hour. So I don't know what we're at. Do you know what we're at? 22, right? Okay.
Ooh, how'd you know that?
I just saw it on my phone.
Gotcha.
So I'm just going to put new yarn in. I am going to overlap 1 stitch. So 1 stitch is going to have 2 stitches on it just to catch that. It doesn't have to, but we're going to. Okay, so slowly crank forward. Now with this yarn, I'm going to go back to my average tension, which was 43 clicks from the top, but everybody's is going to be different because not everybody's bolt is going to have the same amount of ridges. So you have to just be aware of that. I say 43, but that's specific to my machine. So we're going to crank a little bit. All right.
Okay, before you get too far into it.
Okay.
So I remember when you were 2 weeks into this, you were cussing up a storm saying that I am not smart enough for this, and you were beating the heck out of yourself. So Miss Maureen is 2 weeks in, and she's dropping stitches at the corners.
Practice. And I know it's a lot of time on the machine, but any new tool, I've said this in almost every video I've made. I have a playlist for all my cranking videos. Every new tool, it takes hours to learn it, right? And this is your tool. It's a new tool, right? So I definitely cursed at it. I definitely cranked a lot of tubes. And then I was like, I don't want to cut in heels and toes every time. I want to make a full sock. I want to make the full sock on my machine. So I practice. I took waste yarn. I took a giant thing of waste yarn, and I just kept making failed heel after failed heel after failed heel. And I had this crazy, weird looking, lopsided looking tube of bumps from the heels. And it really got me in the headspace and practicing where to place my weight, okay?
And Slivka said, "Hi, Aquilla."
Hi. So I also am now using a new tool. I bought a V-hook for my weights. I bought a V-hook to learn how to do heels and weights with a V-hook. And this has been a whole new learning curve for me because you put weights on this instead of using your heel forks, which Earl Backer gives you 4 weights, or 3, I apologize. You get 3 with the forks, right? So let's just go into it. Let's do it.
Well, hold on. While you're at it, the hooks, do they come with the machine when you buy them, or is
Yes,
that
you always get your heel forks.
So
yeah.
you get those.
Yes,
So
definitely.
that's where the practice comes from, or where the practice should be.
Right, because you have to learn the placement, and that's like the hardest part of the pulling the yarn correctly downwards, because it has to pull in the right places. So let's put these needles up. I'm going to do just a half heel because in my opinion, why not just start that way? I mean, you could do a deep heel, but there's no point in doing that. If you're practicing, let's just do a half. So I've lifted up the needles on the back side. Now, people do their heels on the front or the back. It really depends, but we're on the back. So I'm going to crank to the back side of the machine. These are not going to knit because they're all lifted out of work. Okay. We're going to put our heel spring on. So let me just show, because John asked about the tension on this and why about you use it. So if I were to try to crank in the opposite direction, do you see this? Do you see that mess? It's not pulling the yarn. So you have to have your heel spring on to give the tension. Now I'm going to put the heel spring on and you guys are going to watch, right? Ready? 3, 2, 1, go. It pulled the tension on that yarn. It pulls the slack as you go in the opposite direction. So now that I've done that, I needed to lift a needle up because I hadn't done that, because we're going to decrease on the side the yarn is coming from. Now you can do your decreases and increases different ways. This is just my method. This is what I prefer. You can do it differently. Some people do wrap and turns. I just lift one on the yarn side and we're going to crank around. Okay. Now I don't have any heel weights in yet.
Whoa, you're going the opposite direction than what you've been going.
Yeah, because I'm going to do short rows for the heel. So now I lift one on the yarn side, and that's a decrease of 1 stitch because I'm now knitting, instead of 32, I was knitting 31, and now I'm knitting 30. Okay, so let's crank around 30. Whatever you do on one side, you mirror on the other side. Okay, unless you're doing an asymmetrical toe, and some people do that. But we're not doing that. We're just doing a symmetrical toe, or a symmetrical heel or toe. Okay. Lift one on the yarn side and we're going to crank around. Okay. Lift one on the yarn side. Now I still don't have heel weights in because my tension is still okay. It's still not saying that I have too much fabric here. So
how do you know when you don't have enough tension?
Do you see how they're not fully going down really quick?
Right.
Okay. We're going to do one more pass so you guys can see that again. These I'm going to push down a little bit. Okay. We're going to do one more pass. I'm going to lift on the yarn side to decrease, and we're going to crank around. I'll do it slow. When you go slower, though, it really does pull down. But see how these didn't go down to the cylinder? I'm going to push them all down. You want to put your heel weights in. Some people put it in after 2 rows. Some people put it after 3, 4. It really is when you... It's really when you feel like the need. Okay, so we're going to put 1 fork right in the middle, because what you're doing now is... Okay.
Good. I'm letting them see you put it on.
Okay, so you want 1 right in the middle. You're making a pocket of fabric is what you're doing to make this heel. So you want to put... You're shaking it a whole lot, though, when you're doing that.
I'm sorry. I'm trying
It's okay. Okay, so we're going to put 1 fork in, and I'm about... It's hard to show, but I'm about 8 to 10 rows down. Okay, but it's right in the middle. Now, the proper placement to make sure you have the proper downward tension is under the needles that are still working. So I'm going to go in about the same depth down, but I'm under these needles right here. Okay, I'm under these needles. So I'm under the needles right here. Now on this side, I'm going to be about here, and I'm going to go down about the same amount of rows. Okay, so I'm going to put my phone back in the carrier, and I'm going to do that. All right, you can't see it, but I showed you. So under these needles, about the same amount down.
So you have 3 weights.
I have 3 weights now.
All right.
And some people don't use 3. Some people use the V-hook. It really is dependent. So now we're going to decrease on one side from the yarn side. Crank around. What is happening?
Oh. Oh boy.
Shoot. Uh-oh. Oh, I have one needle that went under the V-cam here. Do you see this needle?
Yeah, can you fix that?
Mm-hmm.
That wasn't an answer.
No, I cannot.
Slive is
These
a
also,
fan of the live.
okay, so these also were too far down. This one's gonna knit, but we're gonna undo it. Okay. So this knit, and we didn't want it to.
Wait, you can undo? Like if you mess up, you
Yeah,
can...
you can undo it.
Oh,
so
right on. I did not know that.
I can pull it up and over, and it undid it. Okay, but now I want to take this needle out of work, so I need to make sure I crank far enough, pull it back out of work. Okay, now it's out of work. I must have hit this when I was doing something and pushed those needles down a little bit. It's very important you don't do that. Now we're back on this side, and we're going to decrease one on this side. Okay. Decrease one on the yarn side. Now, as we are doing this, where we put our hooks are now here. They're not under the live stitches anymore, are they? No, they're not. So you eventually are going to have to move them. I'm not going to move them yet, but we're going to do another crank around. We're going to do one more. And at this point, I could keep going until they're not really pulling down, but it is preferable to move them over and up a little bit. The center one is just moving up, and this one is moving over and up. Okay? And now we should be in proper position again with the downward pressure to knit the stitches. That is when they fall off. If you don't have the downward pressure correct, these corner ones are always the problem children. They're the problem child. Okay? We're going to lift one, crank. Okay? Lift one, crank. Now my target mark is this black mark. It really doesn't matter. We're not going to make a real heel. It's not a real sock. This is all just practicing. But now at this point, where I put my forks, they're not in the proper placement anymore. They're still pulling enough, but just barely. Just barely. Oh, this was my last one. So I'm going to lift it, and I do the 1 up, 2 down method. So we're going to crank around, okay? So 1 up, 2 down. Now we're increasing our stitches. And again, we're creating this pocket of fabric. So I, a lot of times, have to move up my middle one more than my outside ones. So up 1, down 2. Okay. These didn't quite go down. You can kind of push it down. It'll be all right. Up 1, down 2. Now they're not going down at all. Can you see how slow some of them went down? Some of the latches are slowly maneuvering. Let's move our weights because we want it to pull down correctly. I don't know if you just saw that, but they pulled down as I moved my weight. Up 1 on the yarn side, 2 down on the opposite, and we're still increasing. They all went down properly. Up 1, down 2. John is furiously typing. What are you doing?
I'm minding my business. You should try it.
Up 1, down 2.
Ooh, Maureen said, what does 1 up, 2 down do?
It's an increase method. It is in the Erlbacher book. It's also in other videos I've watched, and I honestly just really like it. It does leave the tiniest hole in a sock. Let me see if this one has it. So I know I probably did it on this, so it kind of gives this look, okay? It's not the prettiest look, and a lot of people like a wrapped heel, but I don't hate it. I don't hate it. So I use it all the time. I haven't had any problems with my heels blowing out, or John has worn his socks a bazillion times and he hasn't had any problems either. So this is the method I just really adore. And like I said, there are many methods to increasing and decreasing. So my method is not the end all be all, right? So you have to find what you like. So 1 up and 2 down.
So I think this is a good thing to kind of touch on because I'm kind of motivated that Miss Maureen is in the 2-week stage because I got to live through your 2-week stage.
Right. Yeah.
So when you were 2 weeks into this, I remember you saying, I don't know what that means. Blah, blah, blah. Like,
right.
So
and there wasn't a ton. I mean, there's a bunch of resources, but there's not a bunch of resources.
Well, you
But
are
go
the
ahead.
resource right now for Miss Maureen.
Right.
So she is my number one focus.
Got it.
Were you 2 weeks in with 1 up, 2 down? Were you like, what the heck does that mean? Or do we need to take a minute on that to go in?
Well, I mean, like I said, there's just different decrease methods, right? So like I could do just down 1 on the opposite side, right? So what that means is you want to wrap this. If I'm going to do that, I want to wrap this one. I want to wrap this side where the yarn is coming from because I don't want a hole. And then I'm going to go down 1. Okay, so we're going to do that. That closes up your little hole. So now this method, the only thing I hate about the wrapping is I always inevitably lift up latches back here. So I lifted one, I wrapped one, I should say, so I don't leave a hole. And we put 1 down to decrease. So it's the same, whatever you do on one side, you do on the other. Okay, see how my yarn is not going all the way to the bed? Mm-hmm. I want to move my heel weights again because I want that down. I'm moving this one up and out under these stitches, under these needles. I'm moving this one up and over some, so they're under these needles. They always want to be under those working needles that are on the edges. They're so important. So let's wrap.
Okay. Miss Maureen, does that fully answer your question, or do you need a little bit more on that? Before I go on to Smokey the Cat 1296.
Has a question?
Yeah, man.
So we wrapped on this side, the yarn side, and we're down on the other, so we're still decreasing till we get to our half marks. I started on this side, so my mirror is kind of off, but the concept is all the same. So I wrapped this needle and we're going down on this side. Wow, we turned from tension to heel corners. I love this. Okay, so
yes, it answered my question. All right, so Smokey the Cat 1296. What do you use for ravel cord? I have yet to get some and am stuck having to pick the waste yarn. What does that mean?
This is my ravel cord.
Oh, I remember you buying fishing line.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I use, this is from Amazon. It's linked in all my other CSM videos in Amazon. It is a 65-pound weight, and it is a mercerized braided line. This brand has a bunch of different colors. I picked this one because I thought it would really stand out. And yes, I use this almost every time I make a sock because I save all my waste yarn. I reuse my waste yarn so I don't have to cut it or pick it because I hate doing that. I am not a fan. I am very frugal and I don't want to waste things. So yeah, so we're back at the point pretty much where I would wrap this last one. I'm going to put this one down, but we're going to fully go in the round almost at this point. So that is not probably typical of that decrease, but we're just going to go with it. So we're going to put these down. I don't know if anybody missed anything about tension in the beginning, but they can definitely go back and rewatch the live. I'm going to post it. We're putting all of our stitches back into work because we're going to go back in the round again. But please, please, please make sure you are taking the pad of your finger and just kind of pushing the latches down. Also, you don't have to mash them all the way down. Like I do not have to push those all the way down. See how I pushed them all the way down? They're further down than the others. You don't have to do that. As long as they're down in working order, pretty much where the end of the latch is touching the stitch is plenty to go back in the round.
A commenter by the name of Johnny Bow said it's time to glug a Guinness.
Cheers, y'all. Happy St. Patrick's Day. Not everybody celebrates, but
cheers, y'all.
Yeah. All right, I didn't glug. I drank. Okay, so we're just back in the round again at this point, but we did a little bit of talking about tension. Okay, this was a question I got in my last live, and I think it's very important, and I don't know if I mention it as much in my videos. I'm leaving those heel forks on. Do not take your heel forks off. You still have this pocket of fabric on this side. And if you don't have the weights pulling down on this fabric here that's attached to the needles, they're gonna pop off They're not going to stay on the machine. The big weight that's on your buckle is not going to pull down enough because that's attached to the beginning of your pocket of fabric, not to the end. You want to keep your heel forks on. Your heel weights should stay on until the heel gets past the bottom of your machine that you can put your buckle on it. If you can't put your buckle on the heel that you made, you haven't cranked enough. So keep cranking. Okay? So you would keep cranking, leaving your heel weights on until you can put that buckle over that heel. Okay? So my fishing line, you want to see that again?
Well, no, I want to be able to type it in here.
Oh, there you go. There you go.
Just in case.
I will the link is in my other videos. I know it is because I definitely get questions on that. Okay? So yeah, so we talked about tension. We talked about changing this here. It comes factory set that you'll be able to crank a tube. Okay? It might not be the fabric you love, but you can crank a tube straight from the factory when you put your machine together. If you mess with this too much straight from the factory, you really have to get it back to some sort of quote normal spot that will crank. You don't want it to be too tight and you don't want it to be too loose. This would be way too loose. I would not want this as a sock. I'm just saying, like, I know there's ways around this. You know, I don't have the heel spring on right now. With the heel spring on, this does crank pretty, this yarn. In my opinion, this yarn is a little bit thinner. This is a Jaeger spun that John dyed, or I dyed. I can't remember. And in my opinion, this yarn I think was gifted to us from Erlbacher, actually. Let me get around. I put the heel spring on, so it's going to crank a little tighter. This is the Jaeger spun. And in my opinion, this yarn is a little bit thinner than some of the other yarns that I normally crank. It is 435 yards, which I would think wouldn't be as thin, but it is. I don't know what it is, but it's definitely a thinner yarn for the 100 grams and 435. Like, you kind of can tell if you need to adjust your tension. If your yarn that you normally crank is like, say, a not a Patons. Do I have a, I know I have a Knit Picks in here. Okay. This is like one of the yarns that I would crank very regular in the beginning when I got my machine, a stroll. Not so much tweed, but a stroll. So this is only 50 grams, but if you double this, that's 462 yards for 100 grams. 462 compared to the 435, you would think this would be thicker, but it's not. Like, I don't understand how. I'm not very good at that. That is one thing I'm not very good at determining, like, with yarn weights. I honestly will put the yarn on my machine, crank a few rows, test crank a little bit of a heel, because that's going to tell me if I can crank it at the tension I'm at. Because if I can't crank a heel at the tension I'm at, then I can't crank it. It's going to give me a lot of problems.
We have another question.
Okay.
Slivka. Is your tension different when you use Lycra in your socks?
I have not noticed that I change my tension with Lycra. I know it will shrink up a little, but you got to remember how much wool gives, right? So when I've cranked a sock with Lycra, with a wool that I've cranked before, I crank it pretty much the same tension. I've not changed my tension. I do have, that's another video I need to do. I bought other color Lycra because I want to show how the sock and yarn changes with different Lycra in it. So I have 3 colors. I don't know if you do or not, actually. Are you leaving me again? He's leaving me. Okay. So, yeah, I want to, all messages are visible, just in case anybody. So messages. So I have not noticed so much that I change my tension when I have Lycra in my socks. Because when you wear the socks, they're definitely going to stretch out, right? Like anything you wear that's wool, it's going to like grow a little bit as you wear it. And that's why you want to wash and block your stuff every once in a while, because it will change, wool is very forgiving, right? I haven't cranked a lot of stuff with cotton. I actually was given this cotton to crank, and I haven't done that yet. So I want to do that. Look, I'm stuck to machine. But this is 100. I think this is 100% cotton, actually. Yes, it is. And I haven't made any socks with that 100% yet. I did do a video, I think, with Lycra during Socktober, but I don't, if anything, it's very minimal change when you do a sock with Lycra. And it's only until you activate it that it does do that, like it sucks up and it shrinks a little bit. So again, the sucky thing about Lycra is doing a test swatch with Lycra is really hard, because taking a swatch off that has Lycra in it, oh my gosh, Lycra just sticks to everything. It's like this cobwebby whatever. I know they just said something else about cotton.
I think you used it during October, but I forgot. Can you use cotton on a CSM?
I know people have cranked cotton on a CSM. I have not done that yet. So again, that's going to be a new thing for me. So even though I know the tool, I don't know the material that is going to go on it. It's going to be different. So is there any other questions with tension or... I really hope I went over that well enough with tension. I put my heel spring back on just so you could see this was without the heel spring. And I did put it back on just so you could kind of see how much it does change the spacing. So essentially it will change how much your heel looks different than the leg and the foot of your sock. So anything else?
Not from people, but now I've got questions.
Okay, one more. Let's do one more, and then we'll.
I feel like
close this shop.
I feel like I'm the biggest beneficiary of from the circular sock machine. I know you've ordered. Mm-hmm. I know you've ordered Lycra, and they've sent you Lycra, but if I have nothing with Lycra in it, what is the use of Lycra? Do we need Lycra for socks?
So Lycra will help suck it up and tighten it, right? So like when you activate Lycra, it's like Lycra is almost like, I guess it's a synthetic material, right? So like any plastic or synthetic material, when you heat it up, it sucks up, right? It tightens. Okay. So when you put that in a sock, it will tighten it up a little bit. But you got to remember, after you wear it, again, wool socks, you can wear 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 times before you have to wash them. They're antimicrobial. It's like great. Like if I've worn a pair of socks, I just let them air out for like a day or two and then put them back in my sock drawer until I know I've worn them a few times. But yeah, so Lycra will suck it up and tighten it. I don't think you have any. Actually, did I crank any of your shorty socks? John has been doing a new routine with exercise and running, and I've been making him some shorty socks, and I don't think I have any Lycra. That might be something I do in your socks. Also, Lycra is good if your main yarn content doesn't have any acrylic, because the acrylic helps suck it in a little bit, right? So if you have a yarn, which I think I have in my stash, like a 90% wool, 10% silk. Okay. I might want to use Lycra with that because it'll help do that sucky in, keep the structure type of feeling, you know? So.
All right. My girl Maureen's back.
Maureen's back.
Maureen's back.
All right.
Guess who's back? Back again. She's my little homie here. Would you change tension for heels and toes?
You can.
But not can you, but
do I? You? Do I? No, I don't.
You don't.
So I don't change my tension knob. The only time it changes is if I am making a sock without the heel spring on and then put the heel spring on for the heel, because you have to, because of it having to it has to pull the slack out when you're doing short rows, right? That's why we use the heel spring. I mean, there are people out there that don't use the heel spring. I know there are crankers out there that are old school, maybe not even old school. I could do it. Like technically, I don't have to put my heel spring on. Let me show you. Like I'm going to take my heel spring off. Now, again, we're going to show you real quick again. We're going to do it don't have to be half-half. I'm going to crank to the back. I'm not putting my heel spring on, but you're going to have to see what I'm doing here, because if I lift a stitch here and I try to crank without the heel spring, I'm getting slack in my yarn. I have to tension it by hand until it catches the first stitch, cranks around. Now, I didn't put a lot of tension when I held it, right? But it can change how it knits. Okay, let's talk more about tension, which I didn't mention whatsoever. Tension based on the source of your yarn. The source of your yarn can change your tension. Because this is your source.
Oh, okay.
I have a cone.
Okay.
This is a source. I could crank from a cake.
You never do that, though.
I don't
You always
ever.
put it on a cone.
Almost always. Almost always.
Almost always.
I could crank from a ball. I could put it in a mason jar, put it on my table, and crank from a ball.
Okay.
Right? If the yarn is getting any tension from the source that it's coming from, it's going to change your tension in your sock.
Oh, no shit. I mean, sorry. Yes. Okay.
If it's not free flowing from a cone, you don't know what your tension is going to be, because it's flopping around in here as a ball. If your ball winder, some people crank from cakes. I'm not going to, that is not a problem. If it works for you, it works for you. But if you're cranking from a cake and this is not the greatest example because I've wrapped it around. If your cake, when you do it on your ball winder, is going too far underneath of the cake, you're getting tension as you're trying to pull it up. You might get tension if it didn't wind onto your ball winder really well. You could get tension when you're pulling it from the center. So you could have really tight tension for a few rows and really loose tension because it's coming out really nicely, right? And then some rows, it's not coming out really easily. So that changes your tension because it's on a cone. It's pretty much free-flowing, perfect the whole time.
Is it adding? It's adding more tension. It will being on a cone, right?
No, it's free-flowing, and it's not. If you're doing it from here, and say I'm pulling this out of here, and it's flopping around. You can see it flopping around in here. That tension is changing every time that ball turns. Okay? So,
chat room folks, how are you putting your yarn on cones every time? Or are you using one of the other methods?
And that's totally fine. When I do scrappy socks, I'm not putting it on a cone. I have these 5-gram balls of yarn. I'm putting it in a jar, and I'm putting it on my machine.
And I love my scrappy socks.
Now, if I'm using scraps that are already on cones, I'm just doing it from a cone.
Okay.
But I also have this ball, bin of scraps, and I just throw them in mason jars.
Okay.
So it can change your tension, right? So I'm going to go back to here and I'm going to lift this one. I don't have my heel spring on, remember? So I'm going to hand tension it from above.
Oh, Smokey has hers wound into a cake and finds it works just fine.
And some ball winders work really well, and some of them don't cake the yarn as good. I have 2 different ones. I have 2 different ball winders.
As much as I spent for one, you better not shit on it.
That one is better if I were to crank from it.
Yay!
But the Knit Picks one goes kind of underneath of the cake and then causes issues because it's trying to pull yarn from this cake from underneath. If you're cranking from the outside of the cake, if you're cranking from the inside, that could be a whole different story, right? So, so back to if we were lifting and decreasing and I'm hand tensioning, I'm not using my heel spring at all. And I know there are crankers out there that do this all the time. Now, because I'm putting such little tension, just enough for that first stitch to grab until it's going in the right direction, my tension here is going to be the same as it was on the leg because I'm not putting that weight from the heel spring on. Oh, and I just dropped all my stitches. So this might be the end of the video.
Wait, no.
I did.
So this seems like a opportunity for me to actually show new folks. Why'd you drop your stitches?
It dropped because I didn't have it tensioned right. And
Okay.
the yarn fell out of the carrier and it didn't grab that first stitch. And
All
so
right.
it dropped all those stitches.
So God forbid,
So
Miss
there we
Maureen
go.
is
I
going
just
through
dropped
the
them all.
world, going through the world being a boss, and she's getting the hang of it, and then this happens.
Honestly, like I said,
what is your move?
You take the whole thing off and you start from the beginning.
No,
Yeah,
really?
yeah. This is a lot to try to pick up. Like if I were
Why'd
to
that
go, because I did my yarn when I tensioned it up by hand,
Okay.
it fell out of my slotted yarn carrier. That's another reason slotted yarn carriers, some people don't like them because the yarn can come out of the carrier.
What is a slotted yarn carrier?
This. So my yarn well, I got to get back to the front to show you.
Okay.
Okay. So my yarn carrier has a slot in it.
Mm-hmm.
The one that comes with the machine does not. You have to thread it through. This part here is also slotted. You can't see, you can see it now. It's slotted here.
Oh, so when you were going, most likely
it fell out
to the left.
Yeah, it fell out of the yarn carrier. Yeah.
What?
Yeah.
So what's the benefit of having that then?
The benefit is you don't have to cut your yarn if you screw up. If you screw up, you have to cut your yarn to take it off the machine. I don't have to do that. I can take it out of my yarn carrier and just take it off my machine and be...
But these Frankenstein socks that you were doing are now ruined.
Oh, these aren't real socks. There's no rhyme or reason to what we were doing in the beginning. So let's just take it off and we'll show people kind of, if I can remember, gosh, if I can remember what we did, we can show the tension from the knit side. Oh, I didn't take it all the way out. Okay, so let's take it all the way out, right? It's out. I'm going to hold my weights because I don't want it all to fall on the floor. Crank it out. Take all my weights off and I can show you guys what we just did. So
we've got a comment.
Oh boy.
Snow Crust Racer uses a spinning yarn holder on her table.
Oh,
it
yeah.
helps to prevent snags.
I've seen people use those, like on a cake where it like comes up or a ball. Yeah, I mean, it's like it's almost like a paper towel holder that spins like a Lazy Susan.
So the entire time I've been trying not to verbally put out different similarities in my business and your thing.
Oh, with the cranes?
With cranes, when we have to replace cable, a slack rope condition is the worst thing that can happen, right? So it'll spin that drum up like a fishing reel that you don't hold your finger on, right? Like it'll get all knotted and stuff like that. So essentially what I just learned is we have similarities to where you never want there to be a slack rope condition, right?
Sure. Yeah, you don't want it to be slack because then it won't work the way it's supposed to, right? So this was like normal tension. We were cranking at normal tension. I can't remember everything we did. I think we tightened it up. We may have went back.
We started up to, oh God, I'm so sorry guys. That was me, not her.
So we kind of went normal, like an average tension. And at the beginning, it was kind of see-through. Like, I like it to be a little tighter. Then we put the heel spring on. I like that fabric. It's really pretty. It looks really nice. And we went back to normal. And then I put a new yarn on so we could see what we were doing here. We were the same tension as this. And you can see how tight and compacted that is. And then we loosened and we kept cranking and then we loosened real, like a whole lot. You can almost see how much wider it is down, like you can stretch it out at the top here way further because we had loosened it like 12 clicks. Do you remember? Like 12 clicks.
Yep.
And here it was, this was pretty tight. You couldn't definitely crank a heel with that because you put the heel spring on and it'd be way too much pressure. You loosen it. And then we loosened it a lot. And then we put this yarn back on and we talked about, excuse me, we talked about, if you could hear that.
Stomach.
We were doing short rows here with, that's not the best example, but we were doing short rows here. And that was the not wrap and turn. That was the one up, two down, I believe. Or I can't remember how far we got. But either way, we were doing 1 up, 2 down, and then we switched to the wrap and turn and doing that. So it's hard to tell, but you can see the tension is tighter in that heel than it was when it was like regular tension here. And then we were doing just cranking a little bit, showing what it looks like. And then we were going into a heel again, and then I screwed it up. So that's where we are.
That is never going to fit my foot.
No, that's it's got like a weird 2 heels in it.
All right, y'all. Before we roll, does anybody have any other questions? Were there any questions that were asked that we don't feel were 100% answered to completion or whatever?
Or suggestions for live demos.
Or suggestions, yeah.
Because look, I have a live and we did tension. So we got to do salvage edge. That was one of the suggestions. So
because we're about to roll off of here, but if anybody has anything that they're unsure of, unclear on, or still wants to know, man, we will stay down here. Or if you just want to see Aquilla chug a Guinness.
No, we're not doing that. Happy St. Patrick's Day, everybody. Happy cranking. I'm always trying to make people confident on their machines. That is what I want people to be. I want people to make socks. I all the time will see comments saying, I watched your videos and I made my first sock, and that makes me feel so good. Like, it makes me so happy to like hear that. So again, it's a tool and you need to practice on it. Nobody becomes a beginner piano player by playing for like 2 minutes, right?
Bro,
unless you're one of those weird geniuses, you know?
That's
like
a weird flex, because I remember how much you were like, I hate everything here when you were new.
Well, right, that's what I'm talking about. Like, and even I'm still very scared of certain things and doing things on here. So like I don't use my ribber a lot because I feel like I'm very much a newbie. I have just started playing around with lace because I've never done that before. So, you know, I feel like there are some parts that I'm pretty good at, and I am not the end all be all when it comes to these things. There are so many people with so much knowledge, and the groups are really great, and the groups can be overwhelming too. So don't get me wrong that the groups, I feel people can get overwhelmed in them sometimes. So I'm going to keep putting out videos to the best of my abilities to make people just have more options, because that's the thing. You might watch a Kitchener stitch from one person and watch a Kitchener stitch from another person and totally get it and not understand it all from the first person. So I feel like the more information that is available for people, that people can then learn different ways, because like I said, mine is not the end all be all.
So Snowcross says, practice, watch, and practice. All of the steps will become intuitive, and it will click together for you.
And that is one reason in my CSM videos, I have a playlist. I don't do a lot of editing. I pretty much show every step, because I feel like if I'm like, okay, let's do 3 short rows, and then I don't show any more short rows and cut to the next part, I want to see the whole thing through. Like, I want to see it start to finish.
Yeah.
Right? I feel that's just how I learn. And if my videos have to be a little longer because of that, they're going to be a little bit longer, because I don't want to cut stuff out.
And Maria Abbott said, thank you.
You're welcome.
And then advised people to hit the like button.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, that's very nice.
Thank you, Maria.
Yeah, I felt very scared doing these videos, because I know I don't have all the knowledge, but I'm also learning with everybody else, and I feel like that's exciting.
Heck yeah, man.
So,
all right, y'all.
All right.
If that is it, we're gonna clinksies.
Happy St. Patrick's Day. Clinksies. All right. Happy cranking, y'all. Bye. Now I gotta figure out how to turn this off, because I can never figure that out.
Bonus material.
I gotta take it off of here, I think. Okay. Close. I don't know. Bye. Nope, that's not it.
Oh man.
Yeah, I know. I'm
Can
really.
you really not hit stop recording?
Maybe. I don't know what I'm doing.
All right.
Oh, here we go.
Into the second
Are you sure you want to stop?
live.
Yep. Thank you.